Welcome to Grow with Purpose. This is the Axiom podcast where we talk about the work that Axiom advisors like Mike LoBue, who's in the studio with me today, the things that they do every single day, every single week out there in the field working with Axiom clients. And this is the second in a three-part series that we're doing on From Laborers to Leaders. And this was Mike's baby. This is something that he was talking about to our team in one of our recent team meetings. And we said, we got to capture that. This is great. Perspective on what it looks like to take people from production positions to leadership positions, which is something that happens all the time in our work with clients. It's kind of the natural way a lot of businesses grow. Rather than hire outside leaders in, they would rather promote. Very smart. And in the last episode, we talked about the cost of not managing that transition well. And we wrapped up by saying, okay, that's great. Like, I get it. It's costing me a lot and I'm all in. Now what? Now what do I do? And this episode, the next one, we want to talk about how do you make that transition effectively?
Yeah.
And today we're going to talk about changing the way people think about themselves as leaders. So in your experience, like what is that? What does it look like to change the way I think about myself?
Well, just remember, all of us have been through this phase a lot of times in our life. At some point, we were in high school and we were mowing lawns and we were working retail and we were doing all sorts of stuff. We were checking out people at the grocery store. That was just life, and that's the way that we were. And maybe some of us went into a trade and we all of a sudden had to learn an entirely new skill set. Some of us went to college and we had to, oh my gosh, how do I manage my schedule? How do I get these things done? Am I part of a sports team? Some people, you played sports your whole life and you graduated from school and now you don't play sports anymore. You have to we were constantly, and I have a friend of mine, he always says that a human's biggest strength is adaptability. We're constantly adapting to our environment and changing and growing, hopefully growing and getting better. That's what the goal is, right? So I've heard also that if you always think the way you've always thought, you're going to always get what you've always got. So a lot of people get stuck in these loops because they haven't made the decision to get out of their comfort zone and reinvent themselves. And again, we've all done this. We've all done this in some way, shape, or form, reinvented ourselves and adapted to a new scenario. And that's exactly what we're talking about here. It's helping. How can we come alongside people and help them adapt to their new scenario? What do they need? How can we support them? One of the questions that you always ask, Joey, is you say, in the next 30 days, what can I bring to the table to help you get here? So the first part of that is they got to have clearly defined things that they're trying to accomplish. So I think a lot of times when someone comes out of because remember, you're harvesting these leaders from your organization, whether they file taxes right now or whether they're a plumber or whether they're an electrician. They're part of your culture already. They kind of know how your company does things. They're part of that way already. So it just makes sense internally to say, hey, we already have the relationships. We've already hired this person. We've already invested in this. You've been paying them for however many years. You're already investing into them. So now you want to raise them up. How can you help them do that the best? They need to start thinking differently. They need to see themselves differently. So I think that's partnering, coming alongside and saying, hey, here is what your job was. Here is what your new job is.
And they're very different from each other.
Here are the components of your old job that are still necessary for you to do. Here are the components that you don't need to do anymore. And here are the components of your new job that we're going to need to master. And I think, inch by inch, anything's a cinch, yard by yard, it's hard. So what pieces, how can we break this down into the next 90 days and say, okay, which of these areas do you want to start on and how can we work on those together? And making checkpoints. People like checkpoints. It is a very, very good thing to help them along the way. So, me, for example, I didn't like talking to people. I didn't like communicating. I didn't like doing any of when I was in high school, I would put my headphones in and I would walk through the hallway. I wouldn't even say hi to anybody, right? So at some point, if I was going to be a successful business owner, if I was going to be successful in any area, I needed to learn how to communicate. So I asked questions to people that were good leaders, people that were good communicators, and they put books in my hand, like How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Still a bestseller after 100 years now. How long has it got to be on the bestseller list for someone to read it? I've heard of that book before. Well, It's been brought up to you more than once. Guess what? You know, so it's learning, saying, okay, this is my job now. I have to work with people. I have to learn how to communicate with these people. I can't just tell them what to do, because most likely in a lot of these scenarios, maybe their boss told them what to do, or maybe the way that they were raised is influencing. We need to help shape how they're doing this. And as the business owner, let's say, or bringing in Axiom to help with this process, we're shaping the direction we want this to go. We're not just letting this happen randomly. As the business owner, remember, it's crazy to me that they plan everything out. They plan their production schedule. They plan out their schedule. They plan out their calendar. They plan out everything. And then they give someone a raise into a next position. And they go, okay, yeah, we'll do your job.
Yeah.
And if there's no planning involved.
Yeah, you're good at the old job. Be good at the new job.
So I think that helping someone think differently it's a strategic process, and it needs to have measurable points along the way, because when they think differently, they'll make decisions differently. And those decisions are going to dramatically affect whether they do their job well.
Yeah.
So that's something that we could track.
One of the things that we ran into early on at Axiom, our job consists of working with the business owner to get clear on values, vision, purpose, mission, get the leadership team together, start to build a plan, let the leadership team build the plan and execute it, start to hold them accountable. And then we have to start executing. And to execute, one of the core tenets that Axiom and a lot of other kind of frameworks advocate for is that leadership team needs to be in the same place at the same time once a week, working on the execution of that business.
Absolutely,
if we can execute 52 times a year, we're going to outperform any business that's doing that monthly or quarterly.
Yeah.
And we had this issue where we would get in the room and we would kind of take it for granted that the business owner knew who the leaders should be in the room.
Yeah.
And then we found out really quickly, well, we had some managers in the room and we had some leaders in the room. And there were some very tangible kind of hallmarks in terms of behavior about who was outing themselves as just a manager that had some authority and who was a real leader. Mm-hmm. And it was the only leaders have any business being in the leadership team meeting, right?
Agreed.
It seems kind of obvious, but I stubbed my toe so many times because I hadn't done a good job of guarding the door to that leadership team meeting. And so we developed a tool. We're going to link it in the show notes, called Leadership Affirmations.
Yeah.
And this outlines 6 ways. And it's funny, I didn't even think about it until we were talking about this leadership mindset. And that's all we were doing. We were trying to get down on paper and get their signature at the bottom that I agree to think about myself this way.
Yeah.
And there's some things in there that are actionable. And I was coming at it from, well, if you're a leader, this is the way I expect you to act. But now, many, many years later, I realized that the struggles that we had getting people to act a certain way, just to give you some examples, it's like, I agree that I'm going to invest time in being a leader. That means I'm going to show up at these meetings on time. It means I'm going to do my one-to-ones. I'm going to do ride-alongs. I'm not going to bitch and moan about, I've got so much in my schedule. You're a leader. It's going to take time.
Yep.
It's things like I understand as a leader that the status quo isn't acceptable.
Yeah.
I shouldn't be satisfied with the way we're doing things being okay because that's the way we've always done them.
Absolutely.
I agree that it's my job to encourage, exhort, empower my people, communicate that well, right? Yeah. So there's these behaviors that we were looking for.
Yep.
But when we might get somebody, we called it the leadership pledge, and we might get somebody to sign that. And then we're like, it's not working. Like, why? Like, they signed it, but they're not doing it, right? Yeah. And we were failing to make that connection between the thing they were willing to sign, which is easy, and the way they really thought about themselves. Do we think about them? Do we think about ourselves as a leader? And we do lots of training content. The Leadership Academy. You actually go to our website. We'll link this in the show notes too. And there's a free version of our Introduction to Leadership.
Yeah. And
it's near the end, one of the later modules in that talks about identifying yourself as a leader, talking to yourself as you're a leader. And all these years later, we kind of realize, fumbling around, what works and what doesn't.
Yeah.
But if you can't think of yourself as a leader and change that identity that you have, like, I'm a leader.
Yep.
And I've got to start not just doing things differently, I got to start thinking about things differently.
Yes.
You're going to find the doing very, very difficult. One of my mentors, gave me the be, do, have formula, which is everybody focuses on what they want to have. I want a higher income. I want a nicer house. I want a legacy. I want this or that. Other. I said, well, the formula is really be times do equals have. So the thing I have to start with is, who do I want to be as a person? And then what am I willing to do? And then that's going to be, the result is going to be the have.
Absolutely.
And when we talk about the being, that's all mindset.
Yeah.
It's how do I think about myself, and what's the standard I have for the person I am?
Yeah, absolutely. Teaching someone and helping them shape their thought process is incredibly difficult. And the reason is because some of it's just weird. It's weird sitting down with someone that's been out in the field for a little while and saying, "Hey man, we're going to have to work on your head." Okay, it's just weird. And they say, "Hey, well, I took this trade because I want to work with my hands." That's great. But if you want to work here, you're going to need to start using your head a little bit more, right? So just like we have tools out in the field, we have tools like books. We have tools like audios. You know, I was taught years ago that you have an eye gate and an ear gate. What you're putting in your eyes and what you're putting in your ears is really, really important. And most people, they don't even think about that. Mm-hmm. They just get in the car and they turn on their favorite radio station, or they turn on, they up in New Jersey, they turn on 1010 Winds, and it would tell them all about the traffic driving into New York City, you know, and all of the, because you turn on the news and this bad thing happened, this bad thing happened, this bad thing happened, or even worse, you turn on some political commentary, and by the time you get to work, you're throwing stuff out the window, you're irritated, and they're not controlling what they're putting into their minds, right? So what do you want to work on? Which areas are there? Podcasts like this podcast? This is an investment for people. We are investing into the listener. If you're listening to this right now, we took time, we set aside time to make this so you can listen to it, so you can invest in yourself. This type of, I've been talking about this Laborers to Leaders podcast for weeks because I can't wait to hand it to people so that I don't have to have the conversation. They can listen to it and it can equip them. What are you doing to equip yourself? What are you reading right now that's helping you do a better job? Are you listening to an audiobook? These things help you think better. They help you think cleaner. What action items? Your action items have to be something along the lines of, what are you doing to get better at your job? You know? And the other part about it is you have to have some sort of measurable result. There has to be some sort of, you have to be able to say, hey, I had to sit down with one of my subordinates. I had to sit down with one of the guys, because you talked about this on the last podcast. When they come to this next position, they're buddies with all these guys. And they have to be able to have relationship with the people that they're leading, but they also have to be able to hold them accountable. And that right there is a skill set. How are they demonstrating that skill set? How are they holding accountability without breaking trust? How are they holding that accountability without making people feel like, oh, they don't like Bobby anymore because he had to have a sit down with Bobby? You should be able to care about your people. You should be able to show care, but you care about them enough to make sure they're doing a good job. That's super important.
Yeah. And when you're doing that heavy lift of, you know, stepping out of a comfort zone to hold a guy accountable that you used to be having lunch with on the job site, you have to remind yourself, that's my role as a leader. I'm not the guy that was on the job site anymore. I'm a leader now. And to that simple cue of just reminding yourself, I'm a leader. And that should be exciting and a little bit terrifying at the same time.
Yeah.
It gets more and more empowering the more you're able to put that on, almost like a jacket. You know, I'm going to decide I'm a leader today, and I'm going to be able to do things because I'm a leader. I'm going to be able to endure things because I'm a leader, because I choose to think of myself that way.
Yeah.
What is it that when you're working with folks and maybe they're new to leadership, maybe that's the easiest place to start. Like, what are some of the things they struggle with in changing the mindset?
Yeah. I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is most of them are straight up down in the mouth. They are just, they'll complain. They'll just talk negative. They'll talk about every scenario under the sun about why this can't happen, why this isn't going to work. And I'm like, hey man, I appreciate you sharing, but that thought, you had to think that before you said that. Those thoughts are not going to get you anywhere positive. You know, I heard Joel Osteen, he said, when you complain, you remain, right? So you have to find ways. I read this book called What to Say When You Talk to Yourself, Shad Helmstetter. I read this years ago, and this was all weird to me, you know? So if you read the word, it says life and death is in the power of the tongue. What does that even mean? It's important what we say. It's important. If you look back to when you play a sport, and you had a big game coming up, and you're looking in the mirror, getting ready to go, and you're like, I can do this. Like you use words to encourage yourself. And I think that that's where people leave it, and they don't understand that that's actually really powerful for shaping the way that you think, because it's something like 70% of the things you hear on a daily basis are you talking to yourself. All the other 30% is some random stuff that's going on, some input here, some noise over here, a show over here, whatever. But 70% is what you're saying to yourself, okay? And all of us talk to ourselves, but most of us aren't talking to ourselves on purpose. So I remember I had to get better at communicating. I had to get better at talking to people. I had to get better at shaking someone's hand, looking them in the eye. So I got these little 3x5 note cards because I read this book, and it said get a note card and write down maybe 5 things that you want to get better at and speak it as if it's already done. I'm a good communicator. I'm great at working with people. All of these things that I was terrible. I felt like I was lying to myself. But what I was doing was I was affirming myself. I was encouraging myself and helping myself. And then as I took action, I would speak it, and then I would take action on it, even though I was scared, even though I didn't want to, right? But you reform those neural pathways in your brain that say, I can't do this. All of a sudden you open that up and you say, I can. Why? Because I'm telling myself that I can. And that's really, really powerful. But again, a very odd concept to sit down with a contractor and saying, hey, listen, I don't like the way you're talking to yourself. Okay. They feel like they're in a therapy session, right? They're kind of like, well, what did I sign up for this? But it's important. And just like you'd encourage your son or your daughter at their game, you need to learn how to be your number one encourager. Because guess what? Not everything's flowers and rainbows and sunshine when you get to work. And some days you're going to be the only one encouraging yourself. You know what I mean? Yeah. So you need to be prepared.
That's really, really good. Is there anything else you would add to, like, what are the challenges that a particularly new leader is going to face? I think you put your finger on one that is, endemic. Like we see it all the time.
Yes.
Is there anything else that you see like really, really frequently with a new leader?
The other thing is self-image, and it goes in hand with what I just said. But Maxwell Maltz wrote a book called Psycho-Cybernetics, and it talked about the concept was you cannot act consistently in a different way than you see yourself. You can't, because everyone has your self-image is literally the picture that you have of yourself. And you might be able to fake it for a little while. That's what actors do. You might be able to act a different way for a certain period of time. But if you do not fundamentally change the way that you see yourself, okay, you may see yourself as, hey, everyone always told me I was just, a gearhead, and I'm always the guy that's going to work on the car or do this or do that. But now you got to manage 6 mechanics. You have to start seeing yourself differently. And if you don't start kind of on purpose making sure that every single day you're making some of those adjustments. And the main way, like I said, is that speaking and acting, speaking and changing your actions. Those are really, really important. It says affirmations. So it's like, I don't feel like a leader. That's okay. You might not feel like a leader until you've led for a little while, because every time we've done something for the first time, we were not good at it. You can use sports. You can use your job. You said it earlier, I think in the last podcast, where you were talking about, I don't feel like I'm doing a good job. I feel like I'm in over my head. I'm barely above water right now. And but that's how we all feel the first time we do stuff. And you have to give yourself a little bit of time to adapt. But you have to remember, this is your new role. How can you affirm yourself and make sure that you're acting, speaking, and doing things on a daily basis that are confirming that you are in that new role?
Yeah, we're not really to the point talking about action yet, but none of this is in silos. They all overlap.
Exactly.
But it's interesting. You might not, because you're not accustomed to it, you might not believe that you're going to start acting differently just because you're talking to yourself differently.
Yeah.
But think about the number of times you don't do something because the way you're talking to yourself. Yeah. So you might say, I'm not good at fly fishing,
yeah.
right? So you never pick up the fly fishing magazine or the YouTube video, but if you're saying, like, maybe I really want to get good at fly fishing, you say, I'm an avid fly fisherman. I'm not yet, but I want to see myself as that. And then that same video comes up, that same magazine crops up in the airport, and you're like, I'm an avid fly fisherman. That's for me. I'm going to, and it's just that subtle difference. It's not, I think in some ways, it's not necessarily about starting the new thing that is going to make the change. It's to stop not doing the thing that is right in front of you.
Yeah.
And you just start seeing, it's kind of like you buy a blue, Chevy Tahoe, and you're like, man, I never realized there's so many freaking blue Chevy Tahoes over here.
Yep.
If you start saying to yourself, I'm a great communicator, you start seeing a lot more videos, a lot more blogs, a lot more podcasts, a lot more books on communication, and you're like, oh, that stuff is written for me.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. It wasn't written for you 30 days ago, but now it's written for you.
That also might have something to do with your algorithm on your cell phone.
True.
So Amazon knows that you're speaking to yourself and to Amazon. Or Google, so that helps also.
Yeah,
so
that's why I'm glad the car thing is probably the better analogy because they haven't yet figured out how to put a bunch of blue Chevy Tahoes in front of me on the road.
Yep. So you're changing your own algorithm. We should write that down. We should.
That's
trademark
good.
that.
Yeah, I like that. That's great.
Good.
When you're talking about this work with people, how long does it take? I mean, you've done this a bunch. What should their expectation be? Maybe everybody's wired different. It takes a different amount of time, but how long does it take? And what do you say to somebody and they're just like, I don't know, man, I've got the 3x5 cards, been doing this for, weeks or months or whatever. Like, can you just give me a hammer? Let me swing a hammer. Cause I know I'm good at that.
Yeah. Things take time. Everything good takes time. If I were to tell you, hey, I can cook you dinner in the microwave or I can cook you dinner in an oven, it's probably gonna be better in the oven. So and good things take time. It just takes time to develop new skill sets. It takes time to build something well. It takes time. If you have something, that's off a production line, or if you have something that's custom, the custom takes longer. But most of the time when something's custom, you like it better because it's more for you, So I think everyone's different. But the other piece of it is how committed is this person to doing a good job? I would find that if you really want to do a good job, you don't turn off. You'll go to work and you'll go home. You say, hey, you know what? I'm going to read that book. I got that. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to invest another 20, 30 minutes. I'm going to read that book. I'm going to listen to that. I'm going to start listening to podcasts on the way to work and on the way back from work. In fact, I can listen to the Grow with Purpose podcast on the way to work and back from work because they're 30 minutes. I can get them. Get them in there, no problem. And you're going to start doing things on purpose. See, that person, that's leader. That tells me that they're active leadership development right there because they want to go to the next level and they start taking actions that say, I appreciate my time at a higher level. Their value to themselves goes up, so they start valuing their time more and they start making these little investments that seem little. But after 90 days, after 6 months of somebody listening to an audio every single day, reading a chapter every single day, taking action at work every single day, the more action they can output, the more and the faster they're going to learn. Yeah. Now, if they're going to do their basic 9 to 5 and that's it, and that's all they're going to put in, and they're not going to do any of this extra, it's going to take longer. So really, maybe it has to do with their personality.
Yeah, as you were talking, I was reminded of a concept that I learned from Dan Sullivan, who's the founder of Strategic Coach. He actually wrote an entire book on this, I think with Benjamin Graham. I might have his name wrong, but the book is called The Gap and the Gain. Mm-hmm. And it came from Sullivan's work with CEOs, where he would get together with these high-achieving CEOs once a quarter. His job is to kind of introduce new thinking tools, new ways for them to frame the things they're dealing with in business, come out with a 90-day action plan, and become a different CEO. And he relates this story in the book, which is really good, of this guy in one of these sessions, and they're talking about their goals for the last quarter and how they've done. This guy's just really down on himself. I haven't done this, I haven't done this, I haven't done this. And you could see the guys around him, like, trying to encourage him, like, what are you talking about? Like, look at the progress here, the progress here. You guys are not in the same place that you were.
Yeah.
And Sullivan could see this guy just wasn't getting it. He refused to look at the things that he'd accomplished as opposed to the things he hadn't. Yeah. And he goes on to explain that entrepreneurs and high achievers, and I would say that the group we're talking about, they've achieved. That's how they've gotten to this position.
Yep.
And they have probably a consistent habit of looking at the horizon and saying, that's where I want to be. Well, the problem is the closer you get to the horizon, it just moves that much farther away.
Yep.
And so Dan Sullivan learned a long time ago that rather than keep people focused on the horizon, he should turn them around and have them look back from where they began, whether that's 30 days ago, 60, 90, 3 years, 10 years.
Yeah.
And that's where the concept of the gap in the gain comes from. So rather than say, well, I fell short, turn around and say, what's the gap that I managed to cover? And what's the gain from where I used to be?
Yeah.
Right. So I can focus on the gap between here and the horizon, which is always going to be the same. Or I can just look backwards and see the gains that I've made during that time, because we're all going to struggle with not having made as much progress as we want to.
Yeah.
And I find personally that if I'll do that, that gives me the energy, and it's mental energy. It's not physical calories that I'm consuming. It's a mental shift of inertia, momentum, kind of an injection of momentum, so that I listen to the podcast, I read another chapter of the book, I pull the 3x5 cards back out, and if we're constantly, as achievers, we're always forward focused. I think Sullivan has a lot of wisdom in saying, hey, every once in a while turn around, look backwards, and give yourself a little bit of credit for how far you've come.
Yeah.
When we talk about this laborers to leaders, these guys, there's so much, I'm talking about the blue collar crowd predominantly, but these guys are so much fun to work with.
Yeah.
Because they're straight shooters. We get to learn new words that we never heard before.
Yep.
Maybe a few jokes, a few stories. But,
absolutely.
But my point is, they're an incredibly practical bunch, but they can also be very skeptical.
Yep.
Right. And like, man, come on. Like, you're talking about these 3x5 cards. You're talking about talking to myself differently. We just got to get production up. I got to get these guys to shape up in the field.
Yep.
Talk to us about, for guys and ladies and people who've been in these production positions, whether it's white collar, blue collar.
Yeah.
Talk to us about their desire to see movement, tangible results. It's what they've based their career on. And now they're in a leadership position, and we're talking to them about a different skill set. What's the connection between that skill set and the tangible results they're so accustomed to?
Yeah. I just think that, life's a struggle between fears and desires. That's it. And when it comes down to it, when you have these people that we're going to bring into these leadership positions, there has to be a desire that they want to go to the next level. There has to be a desire in there because they have to be coachable. There's a level of coachability that needs to be there. Yes, they can be skeptical. Yes, they can come outright and say, I think this is a waste of time, and give the leader or the person grooming them the opportunity to say, I know how you feel. I felt the same exact way when I did this for the first time. I said, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. But here's what I found. Here's where I was lacking. Here's what I was missing. Here's what I needed, and I didn't even know that I needed it. And here's how it's added value. And we need to be able to have that value type conversation where it's going to be a total value added. You need to do these things if you want to do this job well. These tools are going to help you get there faster. And they have to have that coachability, because if they're just skeptical and they're not going to do the work, then they're not the right person.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we talk about, this is actually in the Leadership Affirmations document that we've referenced, is this mindset that we want leaders to have, that their success is really evidenced by the success of others.
Yeah.
So it's no longer about the amount that I can produce. It's about the amount that I can empower other people to produce. Mm-hmm. So if I was the best salesman, I got promoted to sales manager, my closing rate doesn't matter nearly as much. Hopefully not at all. Hopefully you're not competing with your salespeople for sales. That's a whole different podcast.
Yeah.
But what really indicates you're being successful as a leader is everybody else's closing rate increases. Their sales numbers increase. And I think that can be hard for a leader, like going back to what we were saying about the high achievers, right? They are in a lot of ways like self-made. Like some of the business owners that we work with that literally decided one day in somebody else's truck, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this.
Yep.
I'm going to go get my own truck. And they go, their office is their kitchen table for the first 3 years. And they're like, I did it. And yes, you did. Like, amazing. You are the 1% of the 1% of the 1%. But now what's going to allow you to step out of the business for 30 or 60 or 90 days is not you being the one who can do it.
Exactly.
It's them being the ones that can do it.
Yep.
So you have to, are you willing to, this maybe is a deeper question of, are you willing to fail because they failed? Like, are you willing to own their failure?
Yep.
Because until you're willing to own their failure, you're probably not going to own their success.
Agreed.
So I think there is room, like to your point, they have to realize, do I think I have all the answers, or am I willing to be coached?
Yeah.
And if they can start from there, there's really nothing they can't accomplish.
Absolutely.
And this is probably a much more universal principle. As soon as we think we've got it all figured out, we really stop growing.
Yeah.
And everything we're talking about here in terms of leadership is like growing a brand new skill set right out of the ground that you've never had before.
Yeah.
So, well, maybe that's a good place to wrap up, because in the next episode, we're going to get into some of the doing things that are coming out of this mindset, which we've touched on some already, but we're going to get deeper into that. So this has been the Grow with Purpose podcast. And one of the things that we believe here, we say it every episode, we believe small business should change the world around it. But it doesn't happen by accident, right? You got to go out and do stuff. There's two things you can do. One, download the leadership guide. It's going to summarize everything that we've been talking about in very actionable ways. Mike has a habit of mentioning like half a dozen books an episode, and I can't keep up with it. But we get to go back to the transcript. We'll pull those things out. We'll put links in there so you can go pick up some of these resources. If you're like, that book sounds exactly what I need, we'll have it there for you. It's also going to have ways that you can implement this stuff with your team, even down to questions you can ask during a lunch and learn, or some self-study stuff that you can do, ways you can give it to your leaders and have them do stuff with it. That's what the leadership guide there is for. We don't believe this is going to make a difference without action. And so we want to provide you with a resource you can do that. The other way you can take action is help us get that message about small business changing the world around it out to more people. So like, subscribe, review the podcast. Helps us out a lot because it becomes more visible to everybody else. And until next week, go out and be a great leader. Think about yourself as a leader. You deserve it. And more importantly, the people that you're leading deserve it. And if not for you, do it for them. And we'll see you next week.